Hello guys, it's Drew. So Phase 2 is among us in the Burning Crusade Classic, and that means a bunch of new gears dropping. We have two new instances, Serpent Shrine Cavern and Tempest Keep, and there are a lot of awesome pieces in these instances that drop for Shadow Priest. So today I'm going to give you my full best in slot guide for Shadow Priests in Phase 2 of the Burning Crusade Classic. And just like all of my other gear guide videos, I'm going to give you a 100% full best in slot list. And then I like to give something called a realistic best in slot list. So this is a set of gear that's minimally worse, but a lot easier to get and a lot more realistic for you to get as a Shadow Priest. So let's get right into it, guys. So before I go into the actual gear guide, there are a couple of pieces that I wanted to point out. A couple of you in my last video actually asked me why I didn't mention these pieces or even talk about these pieces for the gear guide, because these are technically your best in slot pieces, but the reason I didn't talk about them is because they're so hard to get. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, there is a wing in Karazhan that called the Servants' Quarters, and what this is you have to kill all these trash packs in a certain amount of time, and when you do, in the corner, one of three bosses spawns, and these bosses drop one piece of loot with a random enchant on it. One of those enchants can be plus shadow damage. So there are three pieces: the bracers, the belt, and the boots. The plus shadow damage pieces of each of these respectively is more than any other piece you can get, but they are so hard to get and so out of the way for most raids to do. Most raids don't even do this unless, you know, someone is like the guild master as a Shadow Priest and they want to do this, or they just are speed running it and can do it in time. I personally have only done this wing once, randomly in a GDKP, because they were hoping the shadow damage piece dropped and people would bid on it, but it didn't. But one of these random enchants can drop. So as you can see, there are a bunch of them, and the only one we would benefit from is of Shadow Wrath. So the bracers give plus 58 shadow damage, and the belt and the boots give plus 78 shadow damage. So those are way more than any other piece you can get in another raid, but they are so hard to get, I didn't even think they were worth mentioning. I personally have only seen one or two people randomly wearing these pieces, just inspecting them in Shatrath. They're very hard to get and not realistic at all, and that's why I didn't mention them. So there are the Ravager's Cuffs, the Lurker's Cord, and the Gilder's Foot Wraps. Another piece of gear I wanted to mention is the Darkmoon card Crusade. So this piece is technically supposed to come out in Phase 2. It is currently on the PTR, but from what I've read, people said that it was also on the PTR before, so it doesn't necessarily confirm 100% that this trinket will be coming out in Phase 2, but most people are speculating that it is. And the 70 Upgrades website actually doesn't have this on there yet because it's not 100% confirmed. So I figured I would mention it beforehand. So this is the Darkmoon card Crusade. You get this from turning in cards exactly the same as you would in Classic WoW. It's called the Blessings deck. And this trinket gives, each time you deal a melee or range damage to an opponent, you gain 6 attack power for the next 10 seconds, stacking up to 20 times. But also, each time you land a harmful spell on an opponent, you gain 8 spell damage for the next 10 seconds, stacking up to 10 times. From what people have said on the PTR, this procs immediately off of any damaging spell, and it's not a random chance to proc, it's just automatically always procking. So this trinket gives you plus 80 spell damage at all times. This is better than Quag's Eye and Mag's Eye, so I figured it was worth mentioning in case it was in Phase 2, and most people are speculating that it will be. But if it's not in Phase 2, we will go into what you should use instead. So let's get right into the gear guide, guys. So here is the Phase 2 100% best in slot gear set for Shadow Priest in the Burning Crusade Classic. I am going to go piece by piece, explaining it and telling you where to get it. Some of you may notice right off the bat, you do not see any Frozen Shadow Weave. In my last video, I did mention that Frozen Shadow Weave is best in slot through Phase 2. There was lots of discussion on the Shadow Priest Discord about the comparison of Frozen Shadow Weave compared to the Tier 5 Shadow set, and the general consensus was that Tier 5 was minimally better, but the fact that it is a lot harder to get, it's not as realistic to get the 4-set Tier 5 bonus because priests do share their tokens with druids and warriors. So the tanks are most likely going to be getting most of the Tier 5 tokens. In combination with they drop off of the last bosses in a lot of these instances. One of the tokens drops off of Lady Vosh. One of the tokens drops off of Cowl. So these pieces are pretty hard to get. But for the sake of the 100% best in slot gear set, we are going to be wearing the 4 out of 5 set Tier 5. So what is this 4-set bonus? So the 2-set bonus is actually pretty good as well. Each time you cast an offensive spell, there's a chance your next spell will cost 150 less mana. But what we really want is the 4-set bonus. Each time your Shadow Word Pain deals damage, it has a chance to grant your next cast within 15 seconds up to 100 damage and healing. So this set bonus is really good, and the reason why we want to wear 4 out of 5 Tier 5. So the 4 pieces we are going to wear are the hood, the shoulders, the chest, and the pants. The first piece is going to be the hood, 30 stamina, 16 intellect, 24 spirit. We have the Shatar Revered head enchant on it, 22 spell damage and 14 spell hit rating. Since this is a tier piece, it does have a meta socket. The only gem I found on this website was this plus 26 healing and 9 spell damage and 2% reduced threat. And the requirement was that you need more red gems than blue gems. We are going to be using all plus 9 spell damage gems, just like we did in Phase 1. So this is pretty much the only meta gem you should use, unless there's another one I'm missing that requires all red gems. 24 spell hit rating, 55 damage and healing. The hood drops off of Lady Vosh, so this is one of those tougher pieces I was talking about that's going to be to get. And this set is pretty much only worth wearing for the 4 set. You can get 2 pieces before the others, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But the hood is going to be your Phase 2 best in slot helmet. The necklace is still going to be the Ritzen's Lost Pendant, plus 24 stamina, plus 51 shadow damage. I personally have still not seen this drop. I have done Karazhan pretty much every week since launch, and I literally have never seen this drop. I'm still wearing Choker of the Fire Lord, but this is your best in slot necklace. It drops off of Trash and Karazhan, and if you're lucky enough to have one, use it. The shoulders are going to be Wings of the Avatar, your Tier 5 shoulders, 22 stamina, 24 intellect, 24 spirit. You're going to have the Aldor Exalted shoulder enchant, plus 18 spell damage and 10 crit. 2 plus 9 spell damage gems. It gives 17 crit, 41 damage and healing. And the shoulders drop off of Void Reaver in the eye. So this is going to be one of your easier pieces to get. Probably one of the first Tier 5 pieces you realistically are going to have a shot at. For the cloak, I have the Illidari Cloak. So, like I was previously talking about the Karazhan pieces that drop in the Servants' Quarters, those are going to be really hard to get because you need a full raid to clear it. The Illidari Cloak is a BOE, so just naturally, lots of people are going to be killing this mob in the open world, and if they do get a plus shadow damage cloak, they are most likely going to be selling it. So buying the cloak is going to be a lot easier to get than farming the other pieces, so I did choose to include it in the best in slot guide because you have a lot better shot at getting this than most of the other pieces. So this is gives a plus random enchant for plus shadow damage, and it's going to be plus 47 shadow damage, so it's more than you can get from any other cloak, and you're going to have that 2% reduced threat enchant on there. For your chest, you're going to have your tier 5 chest, Shroud of the Avatar, plus 30 stam, plus 30 int, plus 20 spirit, and that plus 15 spirit enchant on it. 3 plus 9 spell damage gems. This piece gives plus 19 spell hit and 55 damage and healing. Great piece. This piece is going to drop off of Cowl in the eye, so the head and the chest both drop off of the last bosses of their respective instances. So unless you're in a great guild that's going to be 100% consistently farming this every week, you're probably not going to have a shot at this till a little later on in the phase. But it still is your best in slot. Your bracers, the Illidari bindings, same thing as the cloak. These drop off of a world mob, and it has a chance to drop a gear with a random enchant. You want the plus shadow damage enchant. These give plus 47 damage as well, and then you're going to have the plus 15 spell damage enchant on the bracers. Your weapon, you are going to be aiming for the Merciless Gladiator's Gavel. So this piece is going to be a little bit tougher to get in the sense that you're going to have to grind for it a little bit, and you're really going to have to try to get it. But the good thing is you're guaranteed to get this after a certain amount of time. This is going to be the arena weapon. It's going to give plus 27 stam, plus 18 int, 15 hit rating, 18 resilience, and 225 damage and healing. And then I forgot to put it, but you're going to have that Soul Frost enchant on there, which is the plus 54 shadow damage. This is better than the Prince Dagger. This is better than the other dagger that drops off of the world boss in phase 1. This is what you should be aiming for 100% if you don't have the Prince Dagger. Your offhand is going to be Orb of the Soul Eater. It's the same as phase 1. From badges, this is one of the easiest pieces to get. Probably one of your first pieces that you're going to get. Gloves, Soul Eater's hand wraps. So you're going to be wearing 4 out of 5 tier 5, and the piece we're going to omit are the gloves, but we're going to use the Soul Eater's hand wraps instead. Plus 31 stam, plus 24 int, the plus 20 spell damage enchant on there, 2 plus 9 spell damage gems, 21 crit, and 36 damage and healing. You could also get, let's say, a pair of plus green shadow damage gloves with the plus 60 on it. It does give more damage than this, but you're only giving up a little bit of spell damage to gain 21 crit, 31 stam, and 24 int. So these are most likely better in most cases than the green plus shadow damage gloves. So the Soul Eater's hand wraps are good off of Magtheridon, what you should be aiming for. If not, the I forget what they're called off the top of my head, but from the first boss of Karazhan off of Atumen, those gloves are just minimally worse than the Soul Eater's hand wraps as well. Next, the Belt of Blasting. So this is a new BOE crafted piece. The pattern drops in SSC. This is going to be your best in slot belt, and it is crafted. If we scroll down here, we can see it's going to cost 2 Nether Vortex. So these are a new Radiant. They drop off of 100%. They drop off of the last bosses in SSC and TK. So you 100% get one off of Lady V, and you 100% get one off of Kael'thas. They also have random chance to drop off of Trash as well. They are BOP, however. So you do need to feed these to people with the patterns. Other than the 2 Nether Vortex, the mats are relatively simple. Just 4 Bolt of Imbued Netherweave, 15 Primal Fire. So going to be a little pricey, but nothing crazy. If you're in a Loot Council guild, definitely if you're in a Loot Council guild and the Belt of Blasting recipe drops, definitely let your guild leader know you want it over other pieces, so they can maybe prioritize the Nether Vortexes for you. If not, I'm sure there are going to be people selling it for a very hefty price, but you should ultimately be aiming for the Belt of Blasting in the long run. The legs, tier 5 legs, leggings of the Avatar, 37 stam, 36 int, 26 spirit. The spell thread on there, plus 35 spell damage. Only one socket, so we're going to have one gem in there. 25 hit, 18 crit, 54 damage and healing. Generally, the legs are just amazing pieces, and they have lots of stats on it, and this does not disappoint. So this is going to be the last piece of your 4 set. So again, you're going to have your hood, your shoulders, your chest, and your legs. And your boots, Frozen Shadow Wave boots, there are no other boots that give more plus shadow damage than these. So even though you're not going to be wearing the full set anymore, the boots are still worth it. Plus 9 int, plus 15 stam, Boar Speed enchant, 2 plus 9 spell damage gems, and then that plus 57 shadow damage, which is really good. So let's get onto the rings. Finally, Shadow Priests get new rings. The good news is we get new rings. The bad news is literal plus 1 or plus 2 spell damage upgrade over what's available. So, and the other bad thing is they both drop off of the last bosses of the instances as well. So first we have the Ring of Endless Coils, plus 31 stam, plus 22 crit, 37 damage and healing. This drops off of Lady Vosh, the last boss of SSC. This is a great ring. Definitely go for it. Probably one of the pieces you should go for first if you're going to just try to wait out the tier tokens. Next, the Band of Alar. This drops off of Alar in the TK, excuse me. So one of the last bosses, but plus 24 stam, plus 23 int, plus 37 damage and healing. So they both give 37 damage and healing, but the other rings that are currently available in Phase 1 give plus 35. If you have the Cthulhu ring, Cthulhu ring is still best in slot through Phase 2 of TBC. Isn't that insane? Who would have thought you'd be wearing classic gear through this long of the game? Trinkets, Eye of Magtheridon. So this is what I was talking about before. If Darkmoon Crusade is going to be in Phase 2, I would put it over the Eye of Magtheridon, but it's not 100% confirmed yet, so we're going to have the Eye of Magtheridon in the gear guide. This drops off of Magtheridon, plus 54 damage and healing. Equip grants 170 increased spell damage for 10 seconds when one of your spells is resisted. So just people have done the math. Again, big shout out to the Shadow Priest Discord. A lot of this information, if not most of this information, I have gotten from there. It's an awesome resource. I highly suggest it. I will put the information in the description below. But they did the math, and Darkmoon Card Crusade is going to be better than Eye of Magtheridon. Icon of the Silver Crescent. This is the same as your Phase 1 best in slot. This is from your badges. 43 damage and healing, and this is like an on-use Toep trinket. Plus 155 damage and healing for 20 seconds. Now your wand. Your Phase 1 best in slot wand was going... your Phase 1 best in slot wand was a green plus 25 shadow damage wand. I personally used a plus 24 shadow damage wand. Still didn't want to spend that extra 300 gold for one damage upgrade. But there is a wand that is better than all the green ones now. It is called Wand of the Forgotten Star. It gives plus 11 hit, plus 14 crit, and plus 23 damage and healing. So it does give less damage and healing than the green, but you're only giving up 2 damage and healing for 11 hit and 14 crit, which is a great trade-off. So that was the full 100% best in slot guide for Shadow Priests in Phase 2 of TBC. And next we are going to get into the realistic best in slot guide. So here we have the realistic best in slot guide for Phase 2. So again, this is a gear set that is minimally worse than the actual best in slot, but going to be a lot easier to get, and generally what you are realistically going to end up with. This is personally what I am going to be aiming for as well. So we're going to start off just going down the list again. First off, we have the Cowl of the Grand Engineer. So you'll see on this list I am not including any of the tier 5. I did that for 2 reasons. The first is that I just talked about it in the last gear set. And the second is I wanted to use this gear set to highlight pieces that are going to be less contested than the ones you're going to be aiming for. Like I said earlier, your tokens are shared with warriors and druids, so you're going to be waiting for most of the tanks to get it, and anyone else who wants to get it as well. But these pieces are going to be less contested because mages and warlocks are going to be going for their tier tokens as well. So you might be able to pick up a couple of these, and they're minimally worse than the tier 5 4-set bonus. The first of those pieces being the Cowl of the Grand Engineer. This drops off of Void Reaver, and this gives plus 22 stamina, plus 27 int. Have that the Shatar enchant on there. 3 sockets, which is awesome. So 3 plus 9 spell damage gems, plus 16 hit, plus 35 crit, and 53 damage and healing. So this is a great piece. Amazing, amazing piece. Definitely comparable with tier 5, just minimally worse. It's going to be a lot easier to get than tier 5, and definitely an easy piece that you can pick up there. Next, the neck, we're going to have the same Ritzen's Lost Pendant. It's definitely lost for me somewhere in Karazhan, can't find the thing, but it is going to still be your BiS. I have it in the realistic guide because once it does drop, no one is contesting you with it. Even warlocks don't really want to use this thing, so this should just fall right on your lap when you do see it drop. Next, I have the full Frozen Shadow Weave set, so I'll just talk about it now. Still have it. Like in my last video, I said you can wear this through the full phase 2. It is just minimally worse than the 4-set tier 5. By now, I'm assuming most of you already have a full Frozen Shadow Weave set, fully gemmed and fully enchanted, so you can generally wear this until you get your tier 5 set bonus. So the full Frozen Shadow Weave is still going to be good for the most part through the whole phase. Next, I have the Royal Cloak of the Sunstriders. This is going to drop off of Kael'thas. So it does drop off of the last boss, but it is a lot easier to get, in my opinion, than the Illidari Cloak. You could wear a green plus shadow damage cloak with a plus 45, which is the highest you can get, but this cloak is just 1 less, and you're giving up 1 damage and healing to gain 27 stam and 22 int, which is really good, and then you have that plus 2 reduced threat enchant on there. Next, we have the Mindstorm Wristbands. These drop off of Alar in the eye. These give plus 13 stam, plus 13 int, 23 crit, 36 damage and healing. So you could either wear these, or you could either wear a green plus shadow damage bracers, or you could still wear your Bracers of Havoc. Bracers of Havoc give plus 3 damage more than the Mindstorm Wristbands. And then, like I said, you could wear the green plus 45 bracers as well. These pieces are going to be probably easier to get than the blue Illidari BOE pieces. On Grobulus, I've only seen a couple of the cloaks, and they have both been above 2,000 gold. I haven't seen the bracers yet, so you should probably, in the back of your mind, just assuming you're not going to get the blue BOE pieces. But the good news is these are just minimally worse. 1 or 2 or 3 damage worse, so don't stress over it. For the weapon, we're going to have the Nathrazim Mindblade, or as most of you call it, the Prince Dagger. Drops off of Prince and Karazhan. 18 stam, 18 int, 23 crit, 203 damage and healing. This is what you should be wearing until you get that Merciless Gladiator's Mace. If you don't have this yet, a lot of people still have not seen this drop. So if you don't have the Prince Dagger yet, unfortunately, you're still just going to have to use that Lower City Exalted Mace, and you're just going to have to stick it out until you see the Mindblade drop, or until you save up for that Merciless Gladiator's Mace. The offhand is still going to be the Badge offhand, the best you can get, and still one of the easiest pieces. The gloves, I'm still going to put the mag gloves because this is one of your bigger pieces that you could be aiming for off of Magtheridon. And at this point in the game, there's a decent chance that you could get a pair of these easily because most other classes have it. For the belt, I have the Cord of Screaming Terrors. So this is just literally like minimally worse than the Belt of Blasting, just by like a little crit. It gives the same amount of damage and healing, and it has the same number of sockets. So you could realistically ignore the Belt of Blasting if you wanted, and just go for the Cord of Screaming Terrors. Drops off of the Lurker in SSC. 34 stam, 15 int, 2 sockets, 24 hit, and 50 damage and healing. Next, we're going to have Trousers of the Astromancer. 33 stam, 36 int, 22 spirit, runic spell thread, so plus 35 damage enchant, 3 sockets, and 54 damage and healing. These are a great pair of pants. The combination of the Frozen Shadow Weave plus this helmet and these legs is an amazing amount of spell power. The fact that the legs and the helmet give both 3 sockets is awesome, and definitely these are going to be less contested than most other pieces. You can probably snipe these up pretty easily, assuming you're in a DKP guild or some sort of loot council guild. I'm sure no one is going to be competing for these more than the Shadow Priests. The rings, the Band of Alar. So I put the Band of Alar because you're going to want to go for either the Alar ring or the SSC ring. This one is probably a little easier to get, and also it gives intellect. The Lady Vosh ring only gives stamina, and they give the same amount of damage and healing. So I chose to put the Band of Alar in the realistic. So realistically, you're not going to get both of them. So I have the Cobalt Band of Tyria Gosa, 19 stam, 17 int, 35 damage and healing. If you do have the Cthulhu ring, I personally have the Cthulhu ring. The Cthulhu ring is still one of your BiS pieces, minimally worse than the Band of Alar and the Lady Vosh ring, and that's just stats-wise, gives the same amount of damage and healing, and that's what we care about anyway. So you can, if you have the Cthulhu ring, you can replace the Cobalt Band with the Cthulhu ring. I have Magtheridon again. If Darkmoon Crusade is in the game, you're going to want to go for that, and that is just by buying it. So you can get the Darkmoon card Crusade easily. If not, I have Magtheridon I would use instead and go for that. Trinket, Icon of the Silver Crescent, same thing. This is your badge trinket. This is your BiS trinket. You can get this on your own time. Easy to get piece. And last, we still have the Wand of the Forgotten Star. This is one of the other pieces that you should be going for. I personally am going to wait for the tier 5 tokens to become available. In the meantime, I'm going to aim for the head and the legs, because in my guild personally, I know that the warlocks want their tier tokens, and we use an EPGP loot system, so they're not going to want to waste their EPGP on these pieces. So I'm hoping that I just see these drop and they fall right on my lap. If not, I have Spell Strike. Most of you probably have Spell Strike. This is probably a good time to mention Spell Strike. It's still fine if you want to. If Spell Strike is minimally worse than these two, so if you want to put your loot priority elsewhere and go for the rings first, go for it. You can use Spell Strike and Frozen Shadow Weave probably for the whole phase and still be fine. All of the upgrades in this phase are very minimal, minus the Darkmoon card if it comes out and the Belt of Blasting. Everything else is just a very minimal upgrade, minus tier 5 looking awesome. So this was the phase 2 realistic best in slot gear guide. So that was the full 100% best in slot gear guide for Shadow Priest in phase 2 of TBC. I'm super excited to get back into Serpent Shrine Cavern and Tempest Keep and relive these bosses. Some of my most vivid memories of playing TBC are doing Serpent Shrine Cavern, and I'm super excited to relive it. Let me know if you guys have any suggestions for videos in the future. If you have any questions about this gear set or any of my gear choices, I am going to have a link down below to the 70 upgrades links, so you can all click through and look through my gear choices. Again, a huge shout out to the Shadow Priest Discord. It's a super informative on there. There's always discussion going. If you play a Shadow Priest or you want to know anything about Shadow Priests, I definitely suggest joining it. If you like Shadow Priest content and you want to see more TBC Shadow Priest content, leave a like, leave a comment, and leave a subscribe. And other than that, I'll see y'all in Azeroth, guys.